people to constantly seek reassurance from others. In addition, people who take things personally often feel that they're being evaluated, seeing slights and criticisms where they don't exist. This kind of defensiveness consumes relationship energy like a black hole. In contrast, emotionally mature people understand that most of us can put our foot in our mouth at times. If you say you misspoke, they won't insist on a post-mortem to uncover potential unconscious negativity toward them. They can see a social gaffe as a mistake, not a rejection. They're realistic enough to not feel unloved just because you made a mistake. They're respectful and reciprocal. Emotionally mature people treat other people as individuals worthy of respect and fairness. All of the following traits reveal their cooperative orientation, which will come out in how they treat you. You'll have the feeling they're looking out for you, rather than being solely focused on their own best interests. You might think of these traits as being like the elements of a house's infrastructure, such as heating and plumbing, that are essential to making it habitable. They respect your boundaries. Emotionally mature people are innately courteous because they naturally honor boundaries. They're looking for connection and closeness, not intrusion. For emotionally mature people, on the other hand, getting close to someone often leads to taking the person for granted. They seem to think closeness means manners don't matter. Emotionally mature people will respect your individuality. They never assume that if you love them, you'll want the same things they do. Instead, they take your feelings and boundaries into account in any interaction. This may sound like a lot of work, but it isn't. Emotionally mature people automatically tune into how others are feeling. Real empathy makes consideration of other people second nature. An important gesture of courtesy and good boundaries in relationships is not to tell partners or friends what they should feel or think. Another is respecting that others have the final say on what their motivations are. In contrast, immature people who are looking for control or enmeshment may psychoanalyze you to their own advantage, telling you what you really meant or how you need to change your thinking. This is a sign that they disrespect your boundaries. Emotionally mature people may tell you how they feel about what you did, but they don't pretend to know you better than you know yourself. If you were neglected by emotionally immature parents during childhood, you may find yourself willing to put up with unsolicited analysis and unwanted advice from others. This is common among people who are hungry for personal feedback that shows someone is thinking about them. But this kind of advice isn't nourishing attention. Rather, it's motivated by a desire to be in control. Tyrone's story. Tyrone's girlfriend, Sylvie, frequently took charge in ways that made him uncomfortable, and lately it had been getting worse. For instance, when Tyrone wanted to slow down the relationship, Sylvie analyzed this as a sign of what she called his fear of commitment. She told him that he wasn't allowing himself to see her as she was now and was instead viewing her through the lens of her past behavior. As Tyrone became increasingly unhappy in the relationship, Sylvie urged him to act happier. She kept telling him to smile more because she missed that in him. But Tyrone was missing something too, a partner considerate enough to accept his feelings and consider the possibility that her behavior might be part of the problem. They give back. Fairness and reciprocity are at the heart of good relationships. Emotionally mature people don't like taking advantage of people, nor do they like the feeling of being used. They want to help and are generous with their time, but they also ask for attention and assistance when they need it. They're willing to give more than they get back for a while, but they won't let an imbalance go on indefinitely. If you grew up with emotionally immature parents, you may face your own challenges with reciprocity, having learned to give either too much or not enough. Your parents' self-preoccupied demands may have distorted your natural instincts about fairness. If you were an internalizer, you learned that in order to be loved or desirable, you need to give more than you get. Otherwise, you'll be of no value to others. If you were an externalizer, you may have the false belief that others don't really love you unless they prove it by always putting you first and repeatedly overextending themselves for you. Dan's story. Dan originally came to therapy after the breakup of his marriage to a self-absorbed woman who exploited his generous nature and didn't give much back. In therapy, he realized that he'd sacrificed too much, violating the principles of fairness just as his wife had in taking too much. As Dan began to practice better self-care by not being overly generous, he noticed that he was becoming more interested in women who had a greater capacity for reciprocity. Still, this new way of relating felt unusual to him at first. For example, after paying for an expensive dinner with his new girlfriend, Dan was amazed when she said she wanted to treat him to an upcoming concert. "You gave me a great evening," she told him, "and I want to do something fun for you." Dan was amazed by her reciprocity and generosity, and he was also able to correctly identify it as a sign of her emotional maturity. They are flexible and compromise well. Emotionally mature people are usually flexible and try to be fair and objective. An important trait to keep an eye on is how others respond if you have to change your plans. Can they distinguish between personal rejection and something unexpected coming up? Are they able to let you know they're disappointed without holding it against you? If you unavoidably have to let them down, emotionally mature people generally will give you the benefit of the doubt, especially if you're empathetic and suggest trade-offs or compromises to ease their disappointment. Most emotionally mature people can accept that changes and disappointments are a part of life. They accept their feelings and look for alternative ways to find gratification when they're disappointed. They are collaborative and open to others' ideas. When you forge a compromise with an emotionally mature person, you won't feel like you're giving anything up. Instead, both of you will feel satisfied. Because collaborative, mature people don't have an agenda to win at all costs, you won't feel like you're being taken advantage of. Compromise doesn't mean mutual sacrifice. It means a mutual balancing of desires. In a good compromise, both people feel that they got enough of what they wanted. In contrast, emotionally immature people tend to pressure others into concessions that aren't in their best interest, often pushing a solution that doesn't feel fair. People who are in unhappy relationships often say things like, "Relationships are about compromise, right?" But I can tell by their facial expressions that they aren't talking about compromise. They're talking about feeling pressured into doing what the other person wants. Real compromise feels different, as though your needs were taken into account, even if you didn't get everything you wanted. Believe it or not, compromise can be enjoyable, not painful, when you negotiate with emotionally mature people. They are so attentive and connected that it's a pleasure working things out with them. They care about how you feel and don't want to leave you feeling unsatisfied. Because they have empathy, they won't feel settled if you're unhappy with the outcome. They want you to feel good too. Being treated with such consideration can make compromise a rewarding experience. They're even-tempered. The sooner temper shows up in a relationship, the worse the implications. Most people are on their best behavior early in a relationship, so be wary of people who display irritability early on. It can indicate both brittleness and a sense of entitlement, not to mention disrespect. People who have a short fuse and expect that life should go according to their wishes don't make for good company. If you find yourself reflexively stepping in to soothe someone's anger, watch out. There are enormous variations in how people experience and express their anger. More mature people find a sustained state of anger unpleasant, so they quickly try to find a way to get past it. Less mature people, on the other hand, may feed their anger and act as though reality should adapt to them. With the latter, be aware that their sense of entitlement may one day place you in the crosshairs of their anger. People who show anger by withdrawing love are particularly pernicious. The outcome of such behavior is that nothing gets solved and the other person just feels punished. In contrast, emotionally mature people will usually tell you what's wrong and ask you to do things differently. They don't sulk or pout for long periods of time or make you walk on eggshells. Ultimately, they're willing to take the initiative to bring conflict to a close rather than giving you the silent treatment. That said, people typically need some time to calm down before they can talk about what made them angry, regardless of their emotional maturity level. Forcing an issue when both parties are still angry isn't a good idea. Taking a time out often works better, helping people avoid saying things in the heat of an argument that they might later regret. In addition, people sometimes need space to deal with their feelings on their own first. They are willing to be influenced. Emotionally mature people have a secure sense of self. They don't feel threatened when other people see things differently, nor are they afraid of seeming weak if they don't know something. So when you have an insight to share with them, they'll listen and consider what you tell them. They may not agree, but thanks to their natural curiosity, they'll try to understand your point of view. John Gottman, well known for his research into relationships and marital stability, describes this trait as a willingness to be influenced by others and counts it among his 7 principles for a sustainable, happy relationship. Men are especially prone to rejecting a partner's input since they're socialized to be self-assured and to resist undue influence. When this cultural training goes too far, it can get in the way of harmonious reciprocity in intimate relationships. However, There's no gender corner on this market. Plenty of women also refuse to be influenced by anybody and can be just as rigid as any man. Whatever the gender, unwillingness to consider someone else's point of view indicates emotional immaturity and a rocky road ahead. They're truthful. Telling the truth is the basis of trust and a sign of a person's level of integrity. In addition, it shows respect for the other person's experience. Emotionally mature people understand why you're upset if they lie or give you a false impression. Telling the absolute truth can be hard for all of us at times, for many reasons. For example, when we have to interact with an angry or critical person, we may be inclined to lie for self-protection, but you can count on an emotionally mature person to be genuine and forthcoming when honesty really counts. They apologize and make amends. Emotionally mature people want to be responsible for their own behavior and are willing to apologize when needed. This kind of basic respect and reciprocity mends injured trust and hurt feelings and helps maintain good relationships. Although emotionally immature people may also offer apologies, these are often nothing more than lip service, designed to placate others without a real intent to change. Such apologies have no heart in them and typically feel more like an evasion than relationship repair. People who are sincere, on the other hand, won't just apologize. They'll also make a clear statement about how they intend to do things differently. When you tell people that they've hurt or disappointed you, observe their response. Do they just defend themselves, or do they try to change? Do they apologize just to appease you, or do they understand and care about what you felt? Crystal's story. Crystal found email evidence that her husband Marcos was having an affair. Marcos begged for forgiveness, but the fallout from her discovery almost ended their marriage. After a temporary separation, Crystal decided that she was willing to work on the relationship, but one of her conditions was that they keep talking about what had happened. She needed to understand, and she needed more details. Marcos couldn't fathom this and told her, "I said I'm sorry. What more do you want? Why do you keep bringing it up? What do you want me to do?" The answer was simple. Crystal wanted Marcos to self-reflect, explain why he'd had the affair, and know how betrayed she felt. She also needed Marcos to hear her out instead of shutting her down. People who have been betrayed are often consumed with getting all the facts. It may be morbid curiosity, but getting their questions answered can help them process their pain. It wasn't enough to just apologize. Marcos needed to be available to answer Crystal's questions as she struggled to understand what happened. They're responsive. Once all the basic traits outlined above are in place, you'll also want to seek out people with qualities that give relationships a sense of warmth and fun. Think of the following traits as essential to a fully rewarding relationship experience, just as paint and furnishings are essential to make a house a home. Their empathy makes you feel safe. Empathy is what makes people feel safe in relationships. Along with self-awareness, it's the soul of emotional intelligence, guiding people toward pro-social behavior and fairness in dealings with others. In contrast, non-empathic people overlook your feelings and don't seem to imagine your experience or be sensitive to it. It's important to be aware of this because a person who isn't responsive to your feelings won't be emotionally safe when the two of you have any kind of disagreement. Ellen's story. Ellen's boyfriend was largely incapable of empathy. If she tried to tell him about her day, he listened just long enough to use her story as a springboard to start talking about what happened to him. Eventually, Ellen worked up the nerve to ask him if he could listen and show more empathy, but he thought she was saying he was a bad person. He shot back that she wasn't perfect either. He couldn't respond to her emotional need because he could only hear her request as a criticism against which he had to defend himself. They make you feel seen and understood. What a gift it is to talk with someone who's interested in your inner experience. Instead of feeling strange for having certain feelings, you feel understood because the other person resonates with what you're talking about on an emotional level. When emotionally mature people find you interesting, they show curiosity about you. They enjoy hearing your history and getting to know you. They also remember things you've told them and are likely to reference that information in future conversations. They like your individuality and are intrigued by the ways in which you're different from them. This reflects their desire to really get to know you, rather than looking for you to mirror them. Emotionally mature people see you positively and keep a mental library of your best qualities. They often reference your strengths and sometimes seem to know you better than you know yourself. In the climate of such interest and acceptance, You'll feel that you can be completely yourself and may find yourself telling the other person things you hadn't planned to, or sharing a personal experience that you usually keep to yourself. You'll also notice that the more you share with such people, the more they share with you. That's how true intimacy develops and flourishes. Once they trust you, they'll engage in clear, intimate communication and let you into their inner world. If you've been emotionally neglected in the past, this may be a new and exhilarating experience for you. You'll also discover that when you feel distressed, emotionally mature people don't pull back. They aren't afraid of your emotions and don't tell you that you should be feeling some other way. They embrace your feelings and like learning about the things you want to tell them, and you will want to tell them things. It's wonderful and validating to find someone who really listens. They like to comfort and be comforted. Emotionally mature, responsive people have an emotional engagement instinct that works smoothly. They like to connect, and they naturally give and receive comfort under stressful conditions. They are sympathetic and know how crucial friendly support can be. They reflect on their actions and try to change. Emotionally mature people are capable of taking a look at themselves and reflecting on their behavior. They may not use psychological terms, but they clearly understand how people affect each other emotionally. They take you seriously if you tell them about a behavior of theirs that makes you uncomfortable. They're willing to absorb this kind of feedback because they enjoy the increased emotional intimacy that such clear communication brings. This shows interest in and curiosity about other people's perceptions, along with a desire to learn about and improve themselves. Willingness to take action as a result of self-reflection is also important. It isn't enough to just say the right things or apologize. If you're clear about what bothers you, they'll remain aware of the issue and demonstrate follow-through in their attempts to change. Jill's story. Jill tried for years to get her husband to look at how he ignored her, but each attempt to solicit his empathy resulted in a counterattack in which he maintained that Jill was impossible to please. Over time, his refusal to engage in self-reflection shut down Jill's efforts at intimate communication with him. It wasn't surprising that Jill ultimately left her husband for another man, someone who did care about what she thought and how she felt. Her new partner reconsidered his behavior when she brought it up, and then made an effort to do things differently. They can laugh and be playful. Humor is a delightful form of responsiveness and also a highly adaptive coping mechanism. Emotionally mature people have a good sense of humor and can use lightheartedness to relieve stress. Laughter is a form of egalitarian play between people and reflects an ability to relinquish control and follow someone else's lead. Emotionally immature people often have difficulty engaging in humor in ways that strengthen bonds with others. Instead, they push humor on others even when others aren't amused. They also tend to enjoy humor at someone else's expense, using it to boost their self-esteem. For example, they may enjoy humor that involves tricking people or making them look foolish or inept. This trait is a good indicator of how they will eventually treat you. Humor with an edge, such as sarcasm, is best served as a spice, not the main course. In moderation, it adds a bit of pleasurable tension, but in excess, it reflects cynicism, which is hard to live with as a steady diet. Too much cynicism and sarcasm are signs of a closed-down person who fears connection and seeks emotional protection by focusing on the negative. They're enjoyable to be around. Being enjoyable to be around is a somewhat ineffable characteristic, but it's crucial for relationship satisfaction. Reviewing the traits above, you can see that emotionally mature people have an overall positive vibe that's pleasurable to be around. They aren't always happy, of course, but for the most part they seem able to generate their own good feelings and enjoy life. One woman who finally found her life partner after a series of unsatisfying relationships knew he was the one because she always enjoyed spending time in his presence, even if it was just a trip to the grocery store. What to look for in meeting people online. The characteristics described in this chapter are also applicable to online dating and social networking. In fact, online contacts offer a great opportunity to practice identifying emotional maturity as you read and consider what people are revealing about themselves in their profiles and electronic messages. Although some people are better writers than others, all personal writing reveals something about how people think, what they value, and what they're most focused on, not to mention their sense of humor and sensitivity to other people's feelings. Plus, reading what people have written gives you time to notice how their messages make you feel. Initial phone calls also give you room to observe and note what the other person is saying, while keeping your facial expressions and nonverbal reactions private. In these venues, Ask yourself how you feel about people's timing and pacing. Are they respectful of your boundaries and how fast or slow you want to go in getting to know each other? Do you feel pressured for instant intimacy, or do they take an uncomfortably long time to respond? Do you get the feeling they're pinning too many hopes on you before they even know you? Or are they being a little standoffish so that you have to work to keep the communication going? Are they reciprocal? Do they reference what you said in your previous email or immediately launch into their own topics? Do they keep a conversation going by asking questions to get to know you better or find out your thoughts on a certain topic? Do you find it easy to schedule things with them, or are the two of you frequently out of sync? After reading a profile, email, or message, take a moment to jot down your impressions. This kind of reflection will help you learn to focus your attention on your gut reaction, which will be easier because you won't have the social pressure of a face-to-face interaction. Describe how you feel inside after reading what the person wrote. Will you feel comfortable being yourself, or will you feel like you have to watch what you say and how you say it? Observing your reactions is a crucial skill for identifying emotionally mature people, and online communication can give you excellent practice in doing just that. Exercise. Assessing others' emotional maturity. I've summarized all the above characteristics in the following checklist, which you can use to determine whether a person will be able to give you the kind of relationship you want. If you want to complete this assessment for several people, use the downloadable version of this exercise available at website. See the back of the book for instructions on how to access it. Realistic and reliable. They work with reality rather than fighting it. They can feel and think at the same time. Their consistency makes them reliable. They don't take everything personally. Respectful and reciprocal. They respect your boundaries. They give back. They are flexible and compromise well. They're even-tempered. They're willing to be influenced. They're truthful. They apologize and make amends. Responsive. Their empathy makes you feel safe. They make you feel seen and understood. They like to comfort and be comforted. They reflect on their actions and try to change. They can laugh and be playful. They're enjoyable to be around. The more of these qualities a person has, the more likely it is that the two of you can forge a satisfying and genuine connection. Developing new relationship habits. Now that you can identify emotionally mature people, there's one last piece of the relationship puzzle to address: your own behavior. In this final section, we'll take a brief look at some new approaches on your part that can make your relationships more genuine and reciprocal. You can work on these actions to help your relationships flourish. After all, improving your own ability to interact in an emotionally mature way is an important contribution toward having the relationships you want. Exercise. Exploring new ways of being in relationships. Let's create a profile of emotional maturity that you can work toward. The following list presents a picture of how an emotionally mature person might interact and behave in relationships. Read through the following lists of new behaviors, beliefs, and values, and choose a few to practice. Just pick one or two at a time and be gentle with yourself as you work on them. Some might be harder than others. Be willing to ask for help. I'll ask for help whenever I need to. I'll remind myself that if I need something, most people will be glad to help if they can. I'll use clear, intimate communication to ask for what I want, explaining my feelings and the reasons for my request. I'll trust that most people will listen if I ask them to. Being myself, whether people accept me or not. When I state my thoughts clearly and politely without malice, I won't try to control how people take it. I won't give more energy than I really have. Instead of trying to please, I'll give other people a true indication of how I feel. I won't volunteer for something if I think I'll resent it later. If someone says something I find offensive, I'll offer an alternative viewpoint. I won't try to change the other person's mind. I just won't let the statement go unremarked upon. Sustaining and appreciating emotional connections. I'll make a point of keeping in touch with special people I care about and returning their calls or electronic messages. I'll think of myself as a strong person who deserves to give and receive help from my community of friends. Even when people aren't saying the right thing, I'll tune into whether they're trying to help me. If their effort makes me feel emotionally nurtured, I'll express my gratitude. When I'm irritated with someone, I'll think about what I want to say that could improve our relationship. I'll wait until I cool off and then ask if the other person is willing to listen to my feelings. Having reasonable expectations for myself. I'll keep in mind that being perfect isn't always necessary. I'll get stuff done rather than obsess over getting things done perfectly. When I get tired, I'll rest or do something different. My level of physical energy will tell me when I've been doing too much. I won't wait for an accident or illness to make me stop. When I make a mistake, I'll chalk it up to being human. Even if I think I've anticipated everything, there will be outcomes I don't expect. I'll remember that everyone is responsible for their own feelings and for expressing their needs clearly. Beyond common courtesy, it isn't up to me to guess what others want. Communicating clearly and actively seeking the outcomes I want. I won't expect people to know what I need unless I tell them. Caring about me doesn't mean they automatically know what I'm feeling. If people close to me upset me, I'll use my pain to identify my underlying need. Then I'll use clear, intimate communication to provide guidance on how they could give it to me. When my feelings are hurt, I'll try to understand my reaction first. Did something trigger feelings from my past, or did the person really treat me insensitively? If someone was insensitive, I'll ask him or her to hear me out. I'll be thoughtful to other people, and if they aren't thoughtful in return, I'll ask them to be more considerate and then let it go. I'll ask for something as many times as it takes to get a clear answer. When I get tired of interacting, I'll politely speak up, asking if we can continue our contact at another time. I'll explain kindly that I'm just out of gas at the moment. Do you get a sense of how much more energy and lightness you'd feel if most of these statements were true for you? You'd be active and self-expressive in your relationships, treating yourself kindly and expecting to be heard by others. You'd be freeing yourself from emotional loneliness. Even if you didn't learn these values and ways of interacting as a child, you can develop them now. Having emotionally immature parents may have undermined your self-acceptance, self-expressiveness, and hopes for genuine intimacy, but there's nothing to hold you back now as an adult. Summary. This chapter outlined common attributes of emotionally mature people so that you can recognize such people more easily. It also briefly summarized new ways of relating that can help you create more satisfying and supportive relationships with others. Now that you know what emotional maturity really looks like, you won't be tempted to settle for the next person who shows you some attention or offers you the bare minimum in a relationship. You'll be able to look for what you want and be comfortable observing others until you find it. As you reflect on your emotional strengths and capacity for connection, you'll find that the keys to happier relationships have been within you all along. Epilogue. Understanding your past and embarking on a new future can be a bittersweet process. Shining a light on what happened to you and how it affected your choices can stir up sadness about what you've lost or never had. That's the way light is. It shines on everything, not just the things we want to see. When you decide to uncover the truth about yourself and your family relationships, you may be surprised by what's revealed, especially when you see how these patterns have been passed down through the generations. Sometimes you may wonder whether all this knowledge is for the best. It may even seem as though it would be better not to know. Ultimately, it depends on what you value about life. Is seeking the truth and self-knowledge an important and meaningful pursuit for you? You are the only person who can answer this question, but it's been my experience, and countless other people's, that greater awareness brings its own gifts, most of which involve a fuller, deeper connection with the world and oneself. Working through a difficult past makes things in the present more real and precious, and as you come to understand yourself and your family fully for the first time, you're likely to appreciate life like never before. When you resolve your confusion and frustration about the behavior of emotionally immature people, life feels lighter and easier. My hope is that this book has brought you not only some understanding of yourself and your loved ones, but also some relief and the freedom to live more on the basis of your genuine thoughts and feelings, rather than outdated family patterns. When I see the faces of clients who are discovering their true feelings for the first time and can finally recognize other people's emotional immaturity, their expressions reflect a sense of wonderment and peace. It wouldn't be too much to call it enlightenment. Not one of them would willingly go back to not knowing. With each bit of truth they encounter within themselves, they experience a feeling of self-reclamation. Despite any regrets they may have, an unmistakable sensation of wholeness comes over them, and they feel as if life is starting over from this new point. And it is. People who engage in self-discovery and emotional development get to have a second life, one that was unimaginable as long as they remain caught in old family roles and wishful fantasies. You really do get to start over when you open to a new consciousness of who you are and what's been going on in your life. As one person said, "I now know exactly who I am. Others aren't going to change, but I can change." There's no reason you can't have a happy life starting right now. I actually think it can feel more rewarding to give yourself a happy life now, as an adult, than to have always had it from the beginning. To be aware and present at the birth of your new self as an adult is pretty incredible stuff. How many people get to be awakened aware for the emergence of the person they were always meant to be? How many people get to have 2 lifetimes in one? So tell me, is it worth the pain to get to live twice in one life? Are you glad you've chosen the path of awareness? Yes, me too.